When I say that I'm opposed to collecting, I don't just mean that I'm opposed to the obsession with having a complete collection, a perfect collection, so on and so forth. I'm saying that even at the simplest, most fundamental stage of wanting to have a set of books in a row that are the same size and the same color, there is an impulse to collect, to be a collector, that you have to challenge and overturn, whether we're talking about books, we're talking about video games, or anything else. This is Suetonius, his biography of Julius Caesar, and then chapter by chapter, the successors to Julius Caesar, in case you don't know the book. Yeah, this isn't really going to work with the color scheme on my shelf here. This is a matching set of so-called Loeb editions, right? Books from ancient Latin and Greek. I could have gotten the Loeb edition of Suetonius Lives of Caesar. I think it's in 2 volumes instead. And then I get 2 little red books, same color, same size, same style of writing on the spine, and they don't match up in a row. See where I'm going with this? And I didn't. I did the research. I looked into who has the better translation, which version of the book represents, the current state of the art in terms of scholarship and research. And you end up with a bunch of ugly, misshapen, not matching books, right? This is Apuleius, the Golden Ass, in Latin and in English. This also is available as a Loeb edition in that same pleasing square red hardcover format with the matching gold lettering, right? And you have to make the right choice. That's actually based not just on the content of the book or the quality of the video game or whatever it might be, but that reflects the use you need to make of it. All right? The problem with being a shelf collector, the problem with the collector's mentality, is not the relationship between the video game and the shelf. That's what I hear a lot of on YouTube. People complaining as if the problem here is that video games are being kept on shelves and not being used or not being played or whatever. The problem is the mentality of the collector. And I think it is rooted in attitudes we acquire in childhood. That to have a series of neatly matching books like that represents something serious and professional. That's having a real library, that's being a real intellectual, or even in the utterly non-intellectual context of video games, that's being a real collector. Now, I got some comments from the audience about the disadvantages of physical media as such. Any of these books I could also read on my mobile phone. Any classic retro game you can name in principle, you could play on a mobile phone, you could play on play on an emulation system one way or another. Most of my adult life, I had to live out of one backpack and one suitcase. And not because I was poor. The fact that I was poor had nothing to do with it. I was doing humanitarian work in Cambodia and Laos and Thailand. I was pursuing a combination of humanitarian and research interests. I had ambitions that kept me moving. Taiwan, Thailand, communist China, even around Europe, So I owned very little. And I actually had a set of books in a warehouse in Thailand. They were sent from Sri Lanka to Thailand, and then from Thailand to Canada, and all those books are in a garbage heap right now. They're literally in a dump. All the books I owned when I was in Saskatchewan, some about ancient Buddhism, some about Greek and Latin philosophy, some about Cree and Ojibwe, First Nations languages and history and stuff. All of those are very literally in the city dump. They're rotting as a pile of garbage, So I've lived for many years of my life without the ability to even amass like the few books you see here. And both are hard. Having the possessions is hard. Lacking them is also hard. Again, this is a video game channel. We're talking about video games and not about the life of the mind. I own several different copies of Namco Museum. If you don't know what Namco Museum is, Google it. And as simple as those games are, as little time as they require, 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, I never have time to play any of them. And I want to own Namco Museum, for example, for the GameCube version that has unique two-player versions of some of the classic games like Galaga and Dig Dug and so on, so that at any time I can take that off the shelf and play it, right? There is some use I have for it even when I'm not using it. And as ridiculous as it sounds, right now I actually do have use for having access to both the English translation and the original ancient Latin for Apuleius and several of the books you see here. And owning this huge number of books about ancient Buddhism at that time that had use, even though literally at that time, really, the entire canon of ancient Buddhism I had in digital formats. So it's not worth explaining, but I think you can imagine. It's not just .txt. There are many different ways in which you can preserve books and manuscripts and access them off of a computer hard drive. All right? Collecting. What's good about collecting? The utility of collecting, the value of having a collection, right? Is being able to take things off the shelf and put them into use immediately. Even if they're books you've never read, they're books you don't have time to read, even if they're video games you've never played, video games you don't have time to play. But the problem with collecting, the problem with the collector's mentality, which I think is rooted in attitudes from childhood, how you regarded a library, maybe when you went to a church or a Buddhist temple, how you regarded that wall of books, the professional matching format of books. Our ideas about museums, these authoritative institutions, universities, the problem with collecting is not the relationship between the collection and the shelf. It's the attitude of you as a collector, which is that you're not really doing the research about what version of the book and what format of the book is really the one that you should read. You are just trying to get a matching set that will look good on your shelf. And some of you know just what I'm getting at here. Some of you know how desperately you yearn to have all of the Sega Master System boxes with that grid pattern matching up. And some of you it's Sega Genesis, and for some of you it's, later generations. But, it's not about how it looks on the shelf. It's about what you do with your limited time when you take it off. I'm 45 years old. I don't have another 45 years on this planet. What I do in work and leisure, I have that burden on me, that awareness of death all the time. And your collection, think about who you are now. Think about who you want to be 5 years from now. Is your collection actually helping you become the person you want to be? Or is it holding you back?